Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a great privilege to rise on behalf of the people of Elgin, St. Thomas, London South to ask the government once again to address a critical issue facing not just the communities in my riding but across the country, and that is the rampant lawlessness that exists on streets across this wonderful nation, and specifically when we're talking about drugs, people that are responsible for unleashing vast quantities of lethal, toxic drugs and still find themselves able to partake in the revolving door bail system that this Liberal government has allowed to blossom over the last 10 years. And I want to give, just to set the scene here, a couple of the very staggering statistics here. We know that fentanyl accounts for nearly 2/3 of opioid fatalities in Canada. We know that since 2015, when the Liberals took office, there have been tens of thousands of opioid deaths, a 255% increase in opioid deaths since the Liberals took office. We know that the Liberal government has rejected Conservative proposals to treat fentanyl kingpins like the mass murderers they are. When I first rose to ask this question of the Justice Minister, the public health officials in my riding had released an advisory that carfentanil, a substance multiple times more fatal than fentanyl, was being found by authorities with greater and greater frequency in the community of St. Thomas and in surrounding areas. People are dying, and the people responsible are walking free. And we cannot look at this issue in isolation from the other crime and justice issues that have been allowed to fester under this Liberal government. Now, I have no doubt that the Minister of Justice has sent a representative to address these questions with a prepared statement, and no doubt the government will talk about this forthcoming bail legislation that they've been promising for months. But the more we learn about it, the more we learn this does not deal with the root of the problem. It does not undo the principle of restraint, which the Liberal government embedded in the Criminal Code in Bill C-75, and it is a provision that law enforcement officials have told us, including, by the way, every week as we investigate this on the Justice Committee, has directly caused the early releases of repeat, often violent offenders, and yes, drug traffickers on bail, because this Criminal Code provision says that they must be released on the earliest opportunity and under the least onerous conditions. There is no meaningful bail reform if the Liberal government does not commit to repealing the principle of restraint. And that is the commitment that Canadians who are looking at rampant criminality on their streets, that is the commitment that Canadians deserve to hear from the Liberal government. And the reason this is so important is because crime has victims. Even nonviolent crime, property crime, is a menace to communities, businesses dealing with the consequences of people addicted to drugs who deserve treatment and support. Absolutely. But this cannot come at the expense of looking at public safety as the first priority. So my question to the government, Mr. Speaker, is will the government once and for all put public safety first and repeal the principle of restraint to fix Liberal bail?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to address the concerns about public safety in our justice system. Canadians expect this government to act decisively to keep communities safe, and that is exactly what this Liberal government is doing. After a productive summer and working closely with provinces, territories, and frontline law enforcement, the Prime Minister announced last week that our government will be introducing new bail and sentencing reform legislation this week. The bill will aim to end conditional sentences for sexual assault offenders and introduce a tough reverse onus bail provision for major violent crimes. This means that repeat violent offenders will now have to prove in court why they are not a risk to public safety and worthy of obtaining a release, rather than to have the Crown prove the contrary. The bill will also provide consecutive sentences for multiple offences committed by repeat offenders. Canadians can count on us, Mr. Speaker. We are delivering on our commitments by taking strong actions to keep violent and repeat offenders off our streets. Our government is assuming a responsible leadership, one where it listens to law enforcement, victims, survivors, provinces before drafting laws. And while our government is working in collaboration with police, prosecutors, survivors, and families of victims to develop serious bail reforms, what is the Conservative leader doing? He attacks our brave men and women who put their lives at risk to protect them and all Canadians. Last week, the Conservative leader called the RCMP, quote, despicable, and accused them of covering up for supposed crime committed by a former Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that is dangerous, and it puts in question our rule of law. Even a top aide to Stephen Harper called those attacks made by the Conservative leader, quote, reckless and Trumpian. It is time for the Conservatives to take bail reform seriously and rise above the politics of division. So instead of smearing institutions that keep Canadians safe, the Conservatives should join us in strengthening them. Conservatives like to talk tough on crime, but the record tells a different story. Let me remind this House that when they were in power, they introduced more than half a dozen crime bills, and every single one of them have been struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada. The most recent, Mr. Speaker, the Hills decision in 2023 made it clear that their approach was not only unconstitutional, but ineffective. Last April's Canadians clearly rejected the failed Conservative divisive agenda at the ballot box, and they continue to do so today. Mr. Speaker, our reforms are tough but fair, rooted in evidence, and developed in collaboration with the provinces and territories who are responsible for the administration of justice. We are not chasing headlines. We are building a safer, stronger Canada grounded in the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, this new government is laser focused on keeping Canadians from coast to coast to coast safe. Thanks.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
You know, it's rich for a representative of the party that claims it wants to rein in and regulate misinformation to peddle so much of it in such a short period of time. But in the interest of the fact that I only have a minute, I will say, Mr. Speaker, that the law enforcement officials that the parliamentary secretary claims to be respecting are the ones that have been sounding the alarm about what the last 10 years of Liberal policy has done to handcuff them and prevent them from doing their jobs as effectively as they want. The greatest respect in this House for law enforcement comes from Conservatives who have been calling members of law enforcement across this country to the Justice Committee who have been all saying the same thing, which is that the Liberal government has failed them and by extension failed Canadians. So enough of this bloviating from the government about how it's going to be the saviors of the problem it created. Will they repeal the principle of restraint, yes or no?
Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite may have missed what frontline law enforcement had to say about the Prime Minister's announcement last week on our upcoming bail and sentencing reform legislation that will be introduced by the Justice Minister this week. Allow me to share with him the news. The Toronto Police Association called our plan, quote, a step in the right direction. The Canadian Police Association, the Association for Police across the country, said, and I quote, should be a moment for collaboration, not division, urging all parties to pass this legislation quickly to strengthen public safety and rebuild confidence in our justice system. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the member opposite, what does he know that police officers do not know? Thank you.